everyone. Welcome back to Reality 2.0, the weekly dose of reality edition. I'm Catherine Druckman. Joining me is Doc Searles and Petros Koutoupis. Today we started, I think we're going to start out by talking about normalization of surveillance is what I'm going to call it. And in particular, we were thinking of one story that's come up recently, and I'll let Petros say it in a way that only Petros can.
Yeah,
You're so blunt. I just enjoy your delivery a lot of times.
Well, the article, the headline reads, Amazon's Alexa for landlords is a privacy nightmare waiting to happen. And as I'm skimming through the article, I'm just baffled. Why? Why is this even a thing? I mean, what purpose does it serve?
Yeah, well, I think there's an interesting thing that happens at a certain point. Big tech companies realize that there's a lot of money to be made in the B2B business. In other words, we're going to sell to businesses. Businesses will pay more, and we can get scale. We can, and that's the whole idea. I think with this is like, wow, we can get lots of Alexas into a housing complex by selling to the landlord. I think that's the motivation. They just want scale out of that. As for the surveillance, it's just as creepy as it comes.
Yeah, I like how they're trying to position it as a convenient way for residents to be able to pay their rent or make maintenance requests. But again, I mean, it's scary that this is even.
Yeah. I think if you were to go out there and poll people who have apartments and say, hey, wouldn't you really love to have an easier way to pay your rent and talk to this thing in order to to call for help? I mean, a
solution in search of a problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a problem searching for a way to be a solution in a way. I could see why they're doing that, and they're selling the rings already anyway, right? I mean, that's another thing. You could probably install it with the ring outside the door, and you could do both at once. But there are already stories of people walking home across the street so that the rings on the people on one side of the street don't see them. There are communities where they've had Amazon install or some Amazon contractor install a bunch of Ring doorbells just, in a whole neighborhood, which just turns the whole neighborhood into some kind of a surveillance state.
Yes, that's my concern. My concern is just the normalization of it. Yeah, okay, fine. So people could opt out. People could say, no, thank you, I don't want this device. People could, unplug it. People, there are lots of things, but that's not even the main concern as far as I can see. The main concern is just sort of gradually, introducing these things as a feature, and the idea that probably most people won't think twice about it and just, I could be wrong about that, but I think a lot of people would be like, yeah, sure, whatever, another gadget, cool, but what's the next thing, I don't know. I don't like the idea that this is becoming a normal thing.
I wonder how many are. Do you think it's? There have been so many stories about the nightmare waiting to happen. That's what the story says. This Gizmodo story, which is what I'm looking at. How much is actually happening? I'm wondering whether. Just think about it. What's the motivation for the landlord? Okay, you can buy an Alexa for every one of your apartments. Well, these things are not cheap. It's not like you're buying a doorbell or an intercom. It's kind of like, I think they want it as an intercom of a sort, and one could make a case for it. But what you really need is something that's more or less specialized, or you have an Alexa that isn't just, here's an AI device that could be doing anything, right? That's the problem with it. It wants to do anything, and it's listening at all times, and is busy being smart. You know what? No, I just want, what are people going to actually want? I'm not sure everybody's going to want one of these things, especially if what if you already have an Alexa? You get a second Alexa, or do you rig the one you've got so you can add your landlord to it. That if you're already adjusted to an Alexa, that would be fine, especially if you have some control. I've never had an Alexa, so I don't know. But I mean, if you have some control over what they can hear and all that stuff. But it's creepy. It is creepy, and there will be backlash. I think there's already backlash, but there'll be more.
So I think it's probably useful to go through like what the capability is for anybody who isn't completely clued into what we're talking about. So one of the features that an Amazon Echo has is this drop-in feature. So basically what that means is anybody who has access to drop in, meaning an approved contact, or if the landlord signs into their own account and then supplies the device, then you can drop in, meaning you take, for example, you would have an Alexa app and you would say, tenant number 1, drop in, and there you have a microphone and it's on and you're listening in. A drop-in does not require the person in the room with the device to accept a call. You literally just turn on the microphone and there you are, and you have a two-way communication instantly. So there's that. Yes, are there ways around it if a tenant did not consent to this? Yeah, probably, but it's still a concern. And the other concern, is that, are we talking about a small device with a microphone, or are we talking about a device with a microphone and a camera? Several of the Echo models have cameras, don't they?
I don't know.
I mean, the Echo Show has one, and I think there's this one. I don't even know if they still have it. There's this one that like helps you buy clothes. I don't know. It has a camera. Yeah, it's a thing. Anyway, but I mean, there are a lot of things to be concerned about here. So where do you begin, right? And I don't necessarily think that just because people don't want it or don't actively seek out the device, if it's being provided and especially if it's no additional cost to the tenant, I wonder how many people would just be sort of like accepting and indifferent. I don't know. I mean, there's, we'll find out, I suppose, if this thing takes off. But it is a thing. I think it's the next step after what you described, with entire communities installing Ring doorbells. Okay, great. So now we have total surveillance coverage of the outside of the neighborhood. Well, great. Now we have total surveillance coverage of the inside too.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's actually a character flaw inside of Amazon and I think every company has some, but they're way too comfortable with something that can too easily become surveillance, and the fact that they're big in the advertising business, and they're big in the creepy end of the advertising business now, and they don't need to be. They really don't. I mean, they get thousands of dollars from us every year anyway. Even the less wealthy among us spend a lot of money, I think, on the average, at least in the developed countries, on Amazon. It's too easy. It's too much of an easy way to buy. And especially now, I mean, how many people are just buying constantly on Amazon? And I mean, when you've already eaten so much of retail, why add the surveillance? You've got plenty of information about people who are your customers that you can use to help inform them to become, better customers, which I'm not even sure they do that very well. They make a lot of errors there. Hey, you bought 2 books on math. Here are 10 other books on math. Okay, well, I got them for my grandkid. I don't want to hear about it anymore. But they don't know that. I mean, a lot of the intelligence isn't all that bright, really. And but why but I still think it's a character flaw. I think there's something really tin-eared and tin-hearted about that. And I don't think it's because Jeff Bezos is a tin-hearted guy. I just think that it's a low priority for him, or a low priority for them, or a relatively low priority for them. There's this kind of law in tech that says what can be done will be done until you figure out what's wrong with it. And I think that's what's going on here. They're doing a bunch of stuff that's actually wrong, and there's going to be a backlash.
I don't know.
Go ahead, Catherine. I was going to say it seems pretty obviously wrong. I mean, there is enough backlash. It may be a small but vocal minority, but it's a pretty vocal group of people who do not approve of marketing Ring doorbells to police departments and all of the things that have happened. So I don't think it's a question of until they figure out it's bad. They know, but the benefit to Amazon outweighs any backlash, I guess. Sorry, go ahead, Petros.
No, what I was going to say was I see it as sort of an attempt by Amazon to just discover new markets, find another use for a device that maybe they can't expand upon anymore. And maybe this is one such attempt. We've seen it from other vendors. You can only make an iPad, smaller so many times. You can only make an iPhone bigger, so many times before it starts looking like an iPad. I just think of this more as a desperate attempt to just find new markets, see what sticks. But I don't know. To side with Doc here, it's very creepy.
And I think what you're talking about there is what they call in the business an adjacent market. Like, here's an adjacent market. It's a market that's adjacent to what they're already selling for rings, and it's a market that's adjacent to your off-the-shelf Amazon market. I read somewhere that the majority of iPad sales are actually B2B. They're actually to schools. They're actually to point of sale for retailers, all kinds of stuff like that. I don't know if that's true or not. I do know you see an awful lot of iPads out there that are in business use. They're not in the use of just ordinary people who use them at home. There are obviously a lot of those as well, but it's a pretty handy thing to sell. And I think that Alexa's like that too. I mean, I think that, and there's kind of on Amazon's side, there's probably some crew of people in there just thinking constantly about what else can we do? What else can we do with this thing? We got this thing. We got this cylinder that listens and talks and plays and answers questions and is a great AI research playground. What can we do with it? And the moral thing doesn't tend to come up, and especially when you can get away with it. I mean, we've talked about this before, but part of it is just the complete absence of privacy tools on our side. We don't have a way to signal, hey, you don't follow me. Okay. This is in a house. This is my private space. This is my space, mine, not yours. I'm renting from you, but it's mine, I mean, there's a feeling I got once. I was in a rush to get up to ski in California from Los Angeles, and I was driving this rental car, and wide open road, nobody's on it in the Mojave Desert, and I'm cranking it up a bit, and I get to 80, and it won't go any faster. Why is that? And I actually called the rental agency, and I said, "Oh, that's because we put a governor on it. We won't let you go over 80." And I thought, okay, I get it, but it's my car because it's my space. I want to go fast. It's kind of like, wait a minute, that's not right. And that's a small thing, right? People don't like that.
That's kind of crazy too, because there's a safety issue there. Sometimes you actually need to speed up to get out of the way, But
right, exactly. Yeah, I'm passing this truck and I can't back off.
Unforeseen consequences. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that's, I think a mistake that we make in tech is assuming that it's always up to the business to know all of what's right and wrong. And I think government makes the same mistake. Like, if we make the laws that punish surveillance, then that's going to stop it. But the problem is that we're not building it out on our side. I mean, we ought to have some kind of a thing. I don't know, maybe it's like a SIM chip or a micro SD or something like that would have a slot on the side of an Echo or an Alexa or the Apple One and any of the others that that have a home potty thing, whatever they're all called. What's Amazon's? I mean, Google's. Is that the Echo?
I don't know. Google. I can't remember what Google Home.
What is it? Echo.
Yeah, it's called Google Home, I believe. I don't
Google
have
Home.
one.
Yeah,
Amazon is Echo. Echo and Alexa are the same.
Echo is like the hockey puck sized one, right? Is something like that.
They're all Echo something.
Oh,
Alexa's just the wake name.
So yeah, but I mean, wouldn't it make sense if you let's say I have my privacy policy. Here's my privacy policy. Nobody looks at me. Okay, here are the things I do not want, and it's pro forma. I've got those. It's just ordinary manners, and I jack that into the side of the thing, and they know it already. It's already done, and and then they can't, that thing is turned off, and you've got some sort of auditing mechanism that tells you that. Just like, when a printer, you can, you just clean the heads on it or something, and you've got a little thing in the menu that says printer report, and it says, okay, I'm on 192.2.45 or whatever, and I'm, and I've got this much ink. It gives a report. It'll say the report maybe, or some other thing, but we need our control that we stick onto that, and then we know when we have auditing, and we can tell. It isn't just like, we will trust you not to screw me. Not good enough.
So something that Petros said earlier, back to Petros's point about just expanding the market, looking for additional use cases. Something that I kind of forgot about is that it's starting to really take off in the automobile market. So you can buy a standalone aftermarket device, or you can buy a few models of cars with the Alexa feature built in, and I wonder how long it's going to
steer right, steer left, slow down.
Yeah, and by the way, would you like to buy
Alexa.
A math book? But I wonder how long until it's actually difficult to find a new car that doesn't have some sort of Android integration, Amazon or Apple car.
I hate to admit this, but I helped build those cars.
Oh, you're evil, Petros.
He knows.
Years ago. Those times
so it's your fault.
are gone. But yeah, I'm partly to blame.
Petros.
So Petros, tell us what tends to be built into them, even if it's a several years ago experience. What do they put in them?
Well, when I was working on them, we were a small team, part of a larger German-owned company. I'm going to leave names out, so I do apologize.
Narrows it down.
But we worked with, companies such as Daimler, working with the Mercedes lines, or Chrysler, or manufacturers such as those, and integrating on our embedded ARM-based, boards, Android-based technologies, or technologies that interfaced with iOS and iPod devices very closely, and it was an interesting environment to be in, because we were able to watch that market grow, and then at the same time, on the other end, as a consumer, I was able to see these same technologies that I helped to develop in the cars, and now it's been over a decade, about a decade since I've done that, and the technology has matured even more, but I'm more afraid of it now with the extra control that this technology is taking in the automobile.
But that's the rub, isn't it? Isn't it always how it works? You're like, the technology in and of itself, especially while you're working on it, is cool. I mean, it's cool to work on stuff like that. It's a cool project. It's exciting, and it's a great problem to solve. It's just, it's like we last week we talked about Facebook. You don't necessarily see what it's going to become while you're initially building something.
Exactly.
And that's and that's a disappointing thing. It's not the technology, it's what us awesome humans do with it.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, when I was young and poor, poor people are so resourceful, and for me, it was with cars. I was not a born mechanic, and I was not even a good mechanic, but I was a willing one, and I would work with other people who really knew what they were doing. So I got pretty adept at fixing, well, first Volkswagens, the old air-cooled ones, starting with the one I rolled, but I had a series of those. But I never spent more than like $200 or $300 on a car, and I would get, because my philosophy was, why spend thousands of dollars on a car when I could have like 5 of these or 10 of these for the price of that? So I'd have like 283 and 327 V8 GM cars, and Pontiacs and Buicks, and I never had a Buick, but I had a couple of Chevys, and with Rochester or Holley carburetors, and I knew how to set the points. I knew how to change the plugs. I knew how to change, not just change the oil, but drop the the oil pan and check for this and that. I mean, I could do a lot of work on those things. They were easy to work on. And then when I got not only a real job, but a company that was starting to succeed, I realized I needed a decent car. So I got the only new car I ever bought in my life was a 1985 Toyota Camry. And after I drove that to California and I took it to a mechanic, and the guy said, "That's a computer. That's not a car. I can't work on that. That's got fuel injection, and that thing is going to break eventually." Well, that car went to like 300 and some thousand miles. My daughter got it, and it rusted away in Santa Cruz eventually. The last thing to go in that was the fuel injection. Nothing ever happened to the fuel injection, and the thing that was the computer part of it was good. But contrast that with a friend of mine who came down to our house in Santa Barbara. It took him a while because he had to stop and get it recharged, but in his new Tesla, right, which he loved. But we drove around in his Tesla, and he confessed, he said, "I have to admit, I'm a bit creeped out because this is not his metaphor, but it's pretty much what he said. It was like, this is a tentacle on a company, more as much as a car for me." And he said, I love the way it performs, but I don't like how much it's being monitored at all times. This is an extension of a company. I'm basically on loan with this thing. It's not really as much mine as a car used to be. And he was a bit of a car guy too. So, and I don't think we know everything that's going on with them at this point. I think that, they're getting more and more opaque. And it started in Europe in a way. You go to Europe, it's like, we were in Germany a couple of years ago, and we never going to travel again. But back when we traveled, I noticed, especially in France and Germany, there are no junk cars. There are no beaters running around out there. Your car gets old, like more than a few years old. It's out. There's not allowed on the road or something. I don't know what happens, but it's really weird. But there's this sense that it's all part of a larger mechanism, and I think a lot of the romance of driving, which is still there. I mean, I watch a lot of sports, and you would think nobody ever drives anywhere except in desert and mountains, dangerously in the snow and on cliffs and stuff like that. But I think that's going away. I mean, my youngest kid, doesn't even care to drive. I mean, he's learned to drive, but it's like, well, he had to learn to type, but it's not like he loves to do that.
I've got a funny story about Tesla. So this was for a different company as the previous one I was discussing or talking about. But the year was about 2009 or 2010. And at that time, Tesla was sending what I guess would become the Model A, or the initial car that they would start selling. And they were taking this car from auto show to auto show to, show it off. And the company that I was working for was a small family-owned engineering shop. And they struck a deal with Tesla to provide the LCD panels that are used for the dash and the center console. But the car, they didn't have a car. It didn't work, I should say. It was still in production.
Yeah.
So what they were doing is they took a Mac Mini, they wiped the Mac OS from it, installed Windows XP, and then wrote an application that simulated the odometer and among other features and functions in the car. So I had to work with these engineers to get their application to, or at least the Mac Mini, to function with both panels simultaneously.
So it was Delaware,
Yeah, so they could shove it in the into the car and hidden, maybe in the glove compartment or something, hidden from the public, and that way they can simulate what the car was going to end up looking like, feeling like, and then eventually they released the Model A. But it's my only time in life wherever I had the opportunity to work with Tesla. That was quite some time ago.
Well, that's great. I mean, I think it one of the things that shows is that That is a humble beginning. That's how many companies have done that. I've done that too. I've been involved with companies like, we can't make the thing we said we were inventing work, but we could take this thing that's already out there, and fake it up, and that Tesla did that too. I think is actually rather cool, and that they got past it too is pretty amazing. I think it's a remarkable company. I mean, and also what SpaceX is able to do is mind blowing.
No doubt. I agree.
Yeah. And I think some of it also has to do, and I'm curious, I mean, were most of the people you worked with there, were they young?
I was the only software engineer at the company. Oh, you're talking about working with Tesla.
Yeah.
Okay. I was working with a few engineers and a couple of sales reps. It's been so many years, I cannot remember those details. The engineers were communicated with over email, and the in-person communication was with the sales reps.
So I just have a theory based on really insufficient information, but just like looking at videos and things of people who work at Tesla and talking about how they're making the car and stuff. These are young people, and it's SpaceX more than that. I mean, it's like my vision, my version of NASA is a bunch of hard-smoking, hard-drinking, pure engineer types with crew cuts and white shirts, working at Cape Canaveral and in Houston, back in the 60s. And of course, those guys are all dead or gone by now. But I think it really helps that they were, and I say this as an old person, I think we need more geezers involved in more things, but I think it helps them that they're fairly young. But it could be the young thing also is one reason why, going back to the surveillance thing, that a lot of people who've lived without privacy for a long time are kind of comfortable with denying people, being insensitive to the need, for private communications. Maybe that'll get a rise from some listeners who can write in.
Yeah, that's a good question.
We're full of shit.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder. I do meet a lot of people much younger than me who have similar concerns, but I mean, that's anecdotal evidence of little value, I suppose. But
yeah,
but I am kind of I do wonder what this correlation between age and comfort level with this sort of thing is.
Well, it's interesting that and there've been a number of studies that I've seen, none too recent, but where on the one hand there's this assumption that if you're young you really don't care about your privacy, but actual surveys showed that there's a difference between being willing to acquiesce to the absence of privacy and actually not valuing privacy. That people in general valued their privacy and did not want to be spied on. But that the difference with young people especially was that they were more used to it and kind of acquiesced to it with a big sigh and worked their way around it. We did actually with Customer Commons, we actually did a survey several years ago called Lying and Hiding, something or other like that, and found that 95% of all people lied at least some of the time or otherwise obscured some identity information in order to avoid detection, in order to stay private, as it were, in order to, and I think that's a fairly easy thing for people to do. And I think a lot of people do it.
Got anything else? We have any other topics that we want to cover real quick, or?
Well,
are we good?
Well, here's a brief one. It's just something we could, because I always want to talk about this. I actually think, going back to surveillance, the first thing, I think the tide is shifting on it. I think the fact that, Cory Doctorow jumped right on it and Gizmodo jumped right on this Amazon thing is indicative. I think that, there's an immunosystem out there that's developing, that's growing, and that is us and our tolerance for bullshit, and for abuse. And I think it ties in with, even with what's going on with Black Lives Matter and all of that. I think that the tolerance in general for people being treated poorly is going down, and it's not just people. I mean, it's the planet. It's the rest of it. There's there is a tide shift going on, and it's not all at once, and it's not all simple. But I think the tolerance for surveillance is going down. I mean, I'm seeing it too in the advertising world. I think it's just slowly dawning on that world that direct marketing that requires following people is a dead issue. It's going to die. It's not going to live anymore. They're between European laws and laws here in California and other places. It's just making it too big a pain in the ass to do that. And it's going to shift. So I'm optimistic about that, but I'm also a boring broken record on it as well.
Yeah, well, I hope so. And I think so. We have one of our favorite frequent contributors, Kyle Rankin, has said in the past on the podcast, he thinks a couple of things that really clue people into privacy risk are health data and political issues, manipulating one's political views. And I think in this case, maybe, the current political climate and the current pandemic, I think, may actually alert people to privacy issues, where they weren't previously concerned. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I still feel like, there's still a minority, us included, that are fighting or, vocalizing our opinions against this. I know you're optimistic, Doc, but the pessimist in me, it still thinks there's still a long ways to go.
Yeah.
Well, this is an example of Amara's law, possibly, which is that, but that's where we overestimate in the short term and underestimate in the long. I co-wrote the Clue Train Manifesto back in 1999, and it's 21 years ago, and there was a whole lot of stuff that I expected to happen then. That has either never happened or has happened in a terrible way. Hadn't counted on the surveillance thing. And when I started, some of the projects I'm involved with, it's taken a long time. And people come along all the time and say, yeah, we're ready for that now. And I'm thinking, yeah, I hope so. But we've been ready a number of times before,
Or your next edition may have to change markets or conversations to markets or recorded conversation.
Yeah, markets are surveillance. I mean, that's, markets are spying. There was a guy who did a really good parody of Clue Train that substituted markets are money for markets are conversations, which is actually more true.
Profitable conversation.
Yeah, it was a great parody too. And the guy was surprised that we took it, we loved it actually. We loved that it was parodied. He thought we'd be pissed off. Instead, we loved it.
That's pretty great. Okay. Well,
okay.
I think we've done it. I think we've done the thing.
Yeah, we've done the thing.
Thank you if you've made it
Very
this
good.
long.
Thanks, everybody. It's been good.
Oh, and let's reiterate. Remember, we have an email address. info@reality2cast.com.